So you went into the Naval Reserve in 1963,
Yeah,
and the situation in Vietnam at that time was in the news, but not very much, and certainly we're a long way from where it's going. To what
yeah.
extent, if at all, was Vietnam in your mind at that time when you went into the Navy Reserve in 63?
I didn't have much of an opinion. I knew it was there. I knew people were getting killed, but I didn't know the political reasons. This was in the early 60s when the civil rights and the Vietnam War were big political situations in the country. And I'm sort of a non-political guy at the time, so it was not on my radar screen. I
Hmm.
knew I had to do something, or I was going to go to Vietnam, maybe drafted into the army. So that's why I joined the Marines, the Navy.
And that was, I mean, even in 63, that was part of your thinking that
Yeah, yeah.
oh,
Because a lot of guys that I knew in high school that didn't do anything about their draft status got drafted into the army. I says, well, why don't you do something about it? You can join the Coast Guard, you can join the Air Force, you can join the Navy, but don't join the Marines or the Army because those are the ones that are on the ground getting killed.
and part of the motivation, or it sounds like a major motivation, why the Navy, why not one of these other branches, was that, you really didn't have a particular interest in going to Vietnam.
No, no, it wasn't something I was enthusiastic about.
Yeah. But like other Navy vets I've talked to who had a similar motivation, you did go to Vietnam. You did end up
Yeah,
going to
yeah,
Vietnam.
yeah.
And
I was sort of excited by the time I got the news that I was going to be when I was on the fleet oiler, the USS Caloosahatchee in Boston on the dry dock, and I got the telex, which was assigning me to a new outfit, and I could read it because it was all in military jargon, and it said MCB 71 for sea duty. I says, oh, sea duty means Vietnam. So I says, oh, okay. Um, we're not a combat outfit. We are trained in combat and guerrilla warfare tactics because we have to defend what we're working on. We have to be able to handle all of the equipment. All of the weapons are my 45. What was it 1911? Which I carried with me everywhere in Vietnam, and then I also had a rifle. But we knew how to throw grenades. We knew how to do claymores. We knew how to fire bazookas. We knew how to fire mortars and set those up. And all that equipment was with us when we were in Vietnam. And we had to, whenever we went on convoy, we were fully armed.
yeah.
Um, when we were out in the boondocks working, we always had our weapons with us in the cab. The guys on the bulldozers had a rifle right there with them in the cab of the bulldozer. So we did go through combat training, guerrilla warfare training with the Marines in Camp Lejeune to prepare us for anything that would happen over there. We'd at least have gone through the basic training of how to protect ourselves.
Sure. Now you were with a CB unit, and I want to ask you about what that CB unit did. What was your particular job? Because you weren't yourself a CB, so what was your particular job?
I was what's called a fleet bee. We came out of the fleet. The people in administration, the corpsmen, the administrative, the yeomen, the bursars, the people that handle all the pay and the money, they all come out of the fleet. They're all fleet rates. So we were called fleet bees. I was a journalist, a JO3 photojournalist, which my job was to send out news releases of people that are getting advanced or people that are re-upping, what the outfit was doing, send photographs, and then document the stuff our teams were doing in the field and write stories for a monthly newspaper that we put out called The Transit.
One of the things that's unusual about your experience, and I've read your memoir, is you are on the move a lot. You're seeing a lot of different places. And not only that, but you're regularly making trips to Japan. And then you're also experiencing Saigon. So you're seeing a lot of things. I mean, most veterans I talk to spend their Vietnam tour in a, you know, in a certain area, and that's pretty much where they are, except for R&R. you're moving around a lot. You're seeing a lot of different things. You go to Japan, you get out of Vietnam, you go to Japan regularly, then you're in Saigon. Um, you're in villages, so you see the city life, you see the village life. So it's a very, I think, unusual experience for a junior enlisted sailor to see everything that you did. What did the war, given this particular experience you had, what did the war look like? And let me, flesh that out a little bit. If you talk to a Marine who's in Quezon, late 67 going into 68, what the war looks like is trenches, artillery bombardment, filth, rats, a lot of casualties, ambushes. That's what the war looks like to that veteran. If you talk to a veteran who's on, small Navy boats in the Mekong, the war looks very different. The war looks like brown water rivers and canals and quick ambushes and, and all the, the thick plant life along the rivers, etc. Just the war looks very different. They have very different visual memories of what the war looked like. Um, what did the war look like to you with your very different experience of being in so many different places, leaving the country regularly, coming back, being in Saigon, being in the villages, etc.?
A couple of things. We were stationed on the beach in Shulai, which was like a resort. The camp was nicely laid out. It was built a couple of years before we got there by other CB outfits, and we added to it. We had, I think, 5 clubs where you could drink. There was the EM club for the enlisted men, and there's the AC/DC club for the first and second class. Then there was the Chiefs club, and then there was the officers club. And that's where you spent your evenings. We worked 12-hour days from 7 in the morning till 7 at night, dinner, and then a movie, and then they closed the bars at around 10 or 11. Enough just to get a buzz on, which was good. Because after I got a buzz on, I go back to my office where I lived, and I'd write. So that's where I did a lot of my creative work, a lot of my personal work was those evenings. The base we were on was fine. We had everything we needed there. And on Sundays everybody was down at the beach, which we could hear the surf when we were going to sleep at night. We could hear the surf on the beach. The camp, the Shulai itself, the base was huge, 60,000 men and women. Hospital, churches, libraries, another CB outfit besides ours. The Marines were there, the Army was there, the Rock Marines were there. There was a huge SAC runway, which we had to maintain. And there was 2 other runways for attack for a Marine outfit with attack jets. And we had to maintain that almost every week because they were always getting hit by rockets and mortars at night. Going out into the villages was fantastic. I couldn't have asked for a better National Geographic assignment than that, to go see how these people live. I couldn't understand the language, and they could understand a little bit of mine. The kids were probably more knowledgeable about the language, with American language, than the adults were. They were all kind and nice. The Vietnamese people we saw in the villages and out in the fishing villages and along the road. Very rural, very rural community around us. A lot of fishing and a lot of rice fields and people growing their own food. The base was huge, and it had a big perimeter around it. When we would leave, we'd go through one of the check gates out onto Route 1, which was a dirt road, which went all the way from Saigon all the way up to Hue. Going into Da Nang, which I had to do probably 3 or 4 times a month. I'd go up with a helicopter, a slick. Those are the well, they're armed, but not armed to the teeth. They're not attack helicopters. They're just primarily taxi cabs and buses that are bringing people around from different bases.
Sure.
So I would take one of those up to Da Nang, to the Marine Center, then hitchhike across to the press center, which was MacV's press center, because all the stuff I wrote in photographs had to be approved. And there was a lot of stuff they said, no, you can't say that. So they crossed it out. There were some pictures they said, no, you can't show that. I had to do that. And then I went up and did a couple of stories up there with some of our detachments. We had an interesting group of guys called the Expediters. And what their job was in the morning, they would go around, and the first stop would be to the liquor depot, where they'd pick up a case of scotch or whatever. And then the rest of the day, they had a chief and a first class and two third classes. And what their job was is to go to the different warehouses and get the stuff our outfit needed expedited out. And that often took a bottle of scotch or a bottle of gin or something.
Yeah.
So we call them the Comshaw guys. I did a story on them. But that was important because we couldn't do the jobs we had to do without getting the materials and the equipment we needed. And their job was to make sure that it got sent down on the next ship. Saigon, which was supposed to be the Paris of the Orient, it was a refugee port now because there's so many people coming in from the villages that were in war that wound up camping on the sidewalks. The sewer system was overloaded. It smelled. And the hotel that I stayed in when I would stop overnight, it was all sandbagged because of the sappers would come by on motorcycles and throw satchel charges into lobbies and stuff like that to kill Americans. So it had lost a lot of its glory.
Yeah. You write in your memoir about, if I remember correctly, walking through sections of the city of Da Nang, if I remember right, by yourself. You're in Saigon, at least some of the time, maybe a lot of the time by yourself. Did you feel, did you feel safe walking through the city of Da Nang, walking through Saigon by yourself, at this time?
Um, no, no. When I really felt vulnerable is when I had to fly up to Tokyo every month to put together the battalion's monthly newspaper at the Stars and Stripes building. I couldn't go with my weapon. So I would leave the base, take the helicopter to Da Nang, wait around, walk through Da Nang to the airport. And that's when I felt vulnerable because I didn't have a weapon. Halfway through the deployment, I realized, boy, we're spending a lot of money and a lot of lives over here. The amount of money we were spending to build stuff, squandering stuff, doing stuff the wrong way and having to redo it all over again, blowing up stuff, and ruining the country with bombs and all of the war stuff. I said, these people just need to be left alone. They have a great life with their fishing boats and their rice paddies. Why not just let them be alone and then be free? Why do we have to be here? So when I fly up to Japan every month to put together the newspaper, I would usually catch a C-141 out of Da Nang, and this time it was a KIA flight, killed in action flight. When I was the only person, there was a bunch of people waiting, but they didn't want to go on the KIA flight. I didn't know what it really meant because I didn't understand it until I got on the plane, and then I realized, oh, all of these are coffins, silver coffins that are carrying. I don't know, there was 150 guys dead in those coffins, and I was the only guy there, sitting looking at them. When the plane took off, the crew chief came down and said, the skipper wants you up on deck with us. He doesn't want you down here looking at those for the next 6 hours. So I wrote about that, and I realized what a cost to the American people in money and in lives. Lives that for nothing, for no reason.
So you've expressed this, this sentiment that you're looking at these 150 or so caskets, and you're thinking, so what does the United States get in exchange for this loss? We can see the cost.
Yeah.
What's the benefit? And it seems like you're having a hard time answering that question.
Yeah, I said squander.
Yeah.
Squander.
But when you arrive in Vietnam in April 67, and you don't know any of this yet, you haven't felt the air of Vietnam yet, you haven't smelt the smells of Vietnam yet, you haven't interacted with the people of Vietnam yet, it's all an abstraction. When you're in the air on your way to Vietnam,
Yeah.
in April '67. What did the war mean to you at that time?
I was a little excited. As a photographer and a writer, this is one of the great opportunities to make a difference, to write some stuff that's important, to take some pictures that people can see and start to understand. We are reporters embedded. In other words, we're PR people. We have to write the good things that are happening. We can't write the bad things that are happening. So it is public relations oriented. In fact, the office you work for is called the PAO, the Public Information Office. But the information you put out has got to be positive to the service. You can't tell the truth.
So what were some of the projects that the Seabees outfit that you served with worked on? Just what kinds of things did they do?
Uh, well, we had to every week we had a unit that was just detached to fix the stat runway, which was the Marine base just behind us that usually got hit by rockets once a week. And these, we'd have to pull out the damaged stat. These are steel aluminum mats. Instead of tarring the whole runway or paving it, this was laid down. These are faster. They can put a runway down in a couple of days by just putting these. The bulldozer levels it, and then they just start laying these mats down. They're all interconnected. Well, the mortars and the rockets would hit them, blow them up, suction. They'd have to pull those sections out and pull new sections back in. We were doing that every week. We had a group that was doing road work, both on our base and also between our base and other bases. And that involved a quarry with a quarry crew that was blasting out laterites and granite and stone. And then there was a crusher, stone crusher. We crushed all of it up so we had good bases to put down foundations. There was a tar factory that we ran, which produced pavement so we could pave roads. We built barracks for the Marines and the ROK Marines, the Korean Marines, and we built churches. We built mess halls, fixed bridges. We had a dive team on board, a UDT time, underwater team, a chief and 2 divers. I went with them because I had my certification as a diver. And they were in charge of maintaining an offshore pipeline that went from an offshore terminal that floated out a mile out in the bay, coming ashore to the terminal so that the ships wouldn't get hit. And our job, or my team's job, was to make sure that it was not leaking at any time. They also went and salvaged the helicopters and jets that didn't make it back to the base and had crashed in the sea and sunk. And we had to go put cables on those and haul those up. Down in Quang Ngai, we had a detachment that was building a whole ROK Marine base down there. No, an Arvin base, Republic of Vietnam Army base. We were building the whole campus for them, mess halls and all that. And that required a convoy every week of building materials and supplies for the crew that was down there. And I used to go on that because it was a way to get out of town, out of the base, and see some more of Vietnam. Because they always took people to come along. They had to have at least a squad or 2 of people riding in the trucks for protection. We never did get hit, but we could have.
Yeah. You've mentioned the ROK troops, the Republic of Korea troops, and all the vets I've talked to who had any interaction with them or who was in the same area as them as the ROK troops, they all speak of the ROK troops as having a certain reputation. I wonder if that's true of you as well.
Yeah. They used to come to our base to go drinking because we had all those different clubs. And they would come in and they had human ears attached to their bayonet scabbards on their hip. Yeah.
Wow. Veterans I've spoken with often hear about a kind of a process. They arrive in Vietnam thinking that they're going to play part in preventing the expansion of communism. liberating people in South Vietnam, helping a country become independent. A couple months go by, they see things, they experience things, and they begin to have doubts
Mission.
about the mission, about the way the war is going. Um, as you and it seems that you experienced something like this as well. Um, can you remember, I mean, an event or something that began that process in your mind, or that deepened that process in your mind, where you saw, experienced, heard something that made you think, gosh, I'm not sure that this project in Vietnam really makes a lot of sense.
No, it's not that. It's a creeping realization. Um, Most of the guys in the outfit never left the base. If they went on a convoy, they came right back and didn't interact with anybody, weren't interested in walking through a village or a town, weren't interested in having a drink with some of the local people. I did, and that's who I am. But a lot of them, it was just focused on the job they had and the camaraderie that they were with the guys in the base. Um, they probably weren't left. They probably arrived apolitical and left apolitical. Um, I can't say about. I don't know what happened to the officers. The officers are all college trained. And they used to call me the college kid because I had 4 years of college but never graduated.
Hmm.
Um, um, and then, so we think a little more, we ponder stuff a little more.
And also as a writer, I mean, you're not only observing things, but you have to think about how to,
Is there a story here?
yeah, how to put these stories. So, I mean, your job kind of forces you to observe and forces you to think about things, forces you to see things, forces you to interpret things. And I'm guessing that, along with just your natural inclinations, your personality um, to be observant, I'm imagining that this led you to see a lot of things that maybe a lot of other guys wouldn't see, or if they did see it, they wouldn't really pay attention to it.
What's interesting is about that you mentioned. There's two processes that we use to think. They're actions. One is to take photographs and look at them later to see what it is you saw. Because sometimes what you think you photographed at the time of photographing it, that was not why you made the photograph. But you'll discover what it was you made the photograph for later when you see it. Oh, that is what it meant. Same thing with writing. You make notes, you do recordings, you interview people, and it takes some time to come back and realize what it is that you heard.
Among the things you participated in, among the things you observed, were civic action programs, U.S. personnel going into villages. What sorts of things were done as part of these civic action programs that you observed?
We built an orphanage with the Vietnamese. There was a group of guys. There was a chief that he was the head of a construction company before he went in, and he went in as a chief or first class. And he said, "I'm not here to fight the war. I'm over here to help the Vietnamese. So put me in charge of one of these civic action things." So they put him in charge of two. He built a marketplace for one of the fishing villages with some of our guys. They'd go out on the weekends on Sunday and volunteer, or if they didn't have an assignment to do for their particular profession, he said, "Well, I can go out and work with him." Um, and then he went, after he finished that, then he went and built an orphanage for the people in the village. Um, and we provided the supplies, and they provided a lot of the labor, and our guys provided the know-how and the process and oversaw the projects. That was pretty good. We did a lot of those. The military, the medical unit we had, which was dentists and assistants and a bunch of Navy medics and a couple of doctors. They would go out once a week to a particular village. This was set up by our Civic Action Committee, which was run by the chaplain. And they go to a village, and then everybody would line up and they do triage and fix wounds and abscesses and put medication on and stop infections. And that stuff. And it was good. But I was amazed about this is something. Medics, you have to be a particular kind of person to be a medic. Those people can do things that I would feel very weird about doing. You know, that kind of invasive stuff with people's wounds and people's teeth. And yeah, no, I do what I do. I'm glad I do that.
Sure.
But I really do respect the medics.
I know that you weren't able to communicate with the Vietnamese people using language, but you did take a lot of striking photos of Vietnamese folks, not military. I know, and I know it's hard to know who is with and who's not with the Viet Cong. But in your interactions with these Vietnamese villagers, what was your impression of them? Um, and I guess part of that, what's partly behind that question is the sense that I've heard from a number of vets that, they just kind of came to feel that a lot of these villagers, they could not have cared less about communism or about voting in formal elections. They just wanted to grow their rice, to fish, to have their water buffalo, and to be left alone. That's the impression that I've heard from other vets. What was your impression?
Well, I spent a lot of time in rural New England on my uncle's farm when I was growing up, and they're very much like the Vietnamese. They are very they're family oriented. They're not they don't live in a city. They live in a rural community. Um, they don't know many people. They don't interact with many people. We have the same people here in Maine that live. The nearest neighbor's 3 miles away, um, and they lead their own lives. You're right. You said it that they didn't care about whether most of them were Buddhist, a few were Catholic. The Catholic they probably were both. Politically, it was caught up in the religion because it was a French colony at first. It was a Catholic religion, a Catholic country, and North Vietnam wasn't. It was Buddhist. So there was the religious thing, which became wound up being the political thing. Being left alone to do their thing, it was hard enough just to do that, just to eke out a living for you and your family. The kids were great. They would run to us as soon as they saw a Jeep come into a village. They would all climb all over us. They wanted to interact, wanted to touch us. Some of them to steal our watches, which they did. And then they were easy to photograph. Then as long as you were hanging around, and walking around, everybody was just sort of laid back. They would smile. There was no communication, in other words, just facial expression. So making photographs of them would be a way that I could interact with them because it's a body language thing you're doing. We had a bunch of guys, a bunch of builders that were down on a mountaintop putting up an observation tower, and I needed to go down and photograph them and interview the chief about what they were doing and what the problems were. And so I got Stapleton, who was equipment operator, one of my best buddies in the outfit. We commandeered a Jeep and we left the compound, and with my cameras, and I'm sitting in the front seat and he's driving. There's two of us. Pull out on Route 1, and within 5 miles, there's an explosion ahead of us. Probably about 6 or 7 vehicles. It's a crowded, Route 1 was crowded mostly with local traffic, which is a lot of Vespers and these 3-wheeled trucks, all loaded to the capacity and overweight. And then there's a bunch of military vehicles. Well, what had happened is the VC that night had put a series of road mines on the crown of the road. This is a hard road. It's narrow. It's got 3 grooves, three ruts. So if you're driving on the right, you use those 2, and if somebody's coming from you, both of you have to pull over a bit off the crowns, off the ditch, so that there's enough room to pass. Because the other ones, he's trying to eat, so you can't go into 2 ruts because there's only 3 ruts. And that's when the explosions happened, because now they caught 2 vehicles not just one. They've caught two vehicles. Um, so they blew up a truck with a bunch of with 4 or 5 Marine guys on it. They were a shotgun crowd that was shepherding 2 tankers down to a helicopter base south of us. So everybody came to a screeching halt. We all dive into the rice paddy in case there's going to be an ambush. Well, there was no ambush, but it took about another hour until the demolition team came along with their mine detectors, and they're sweeping the whole roadway, see if there's any others. They found 2 more. One of them was right under the axle of the truck ahead of us that he had stopped, and right under the front wheels between was another mine. He detected it, and they asked us all to back up about a half a mile. That took another couple of hours. And then instead of digging it up, they just put a composition C charge on top of it and blew it up. And that's the picture I got because I was crouched down in the rice paddy to get the picture. That wasn't scary as much as it was exciting. And it was a good example of the technology we brought to Vietnam to be able to find these mines and to be able to detonate them. Those were Army guys that were doing that. And I was really impressed with them. They really knew what they were doing to clear that roadway.
For you then, you're not in a combat role, but you do find yourself in dangerous positions. You've got incoming mortars, you've got the convoy hitting the mines. There's another case where you're with guys up on a river, I believe, and you do
Yeah.
come under fire.
Yeah.
So in your mind then, what is the war about? Once you conclude in your own mind that we shouldn't be here at all, this is a mistake, then what's your own psychological disposition after that? So what are you going to do? You've concluded that this thing is a mistake, we shouldn't be here, but I am here for several more months, assuming I survive it. So then what does the war mean to you at that point?
Well, there's nothing I can do about it.
Mhm.
I have a job to do, and I like my job. I like what I'm doing. So I just keep doing that. I keep covering stories and writing stuff, and going up to Tokyo to put the newspaper together, and then coming back and doing it all over again.
One of the things that I'm picking up from you, as I've heard from other vets as well, is that for all of the negative things that came out of that experience in Vietnam, for you personally, though there was a lot of value that came out of the experience at the same time. So there's this paradox that it was an incredibly negative experience, but in terms of personal growth and personal experience, it was, I mean, you took a lot from it that you benefited from in your life afterwards. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. There was nothing I could do about it anyway. I'm not in a position to
Mm.
have an opinion or to express an opinion. And I wasn't going to get into a discussion with any of the officers or the men because I didn't know where that was going to go. And I probably couldn't articulate it anyway until I got out and had more time to look back, write about it. And it was 50 years after I got out that I wrote the book.
One of the articles you wrote that you reproduce in your memoir is kind of a letter to family members home, saying, your sailor's coming home, your Seabees is coming home. And you're probably going to notice that he's changed. And you write in a somewhat whimsical way, in a somewhat comedic way about some of the things family members might notice about how the sailors that you served with had changed as a result of their experience in Vietnam. But I'm assuming that underneath that was a more serious understanding that 7 months in Vietnam, a year in Vietnam, really is going to change the person who served there. And so I guess I want to just ask you about your own experience. How is the David Lyman who left Vietnam in November '67 different from the David Lyman who arrived in South Vietnam in April '67. How did those 7 months in Vietnam change you?
I'm not as naive. I'm better as a photographer and as a writer. I'm better as a journalist. I'm better at knowing who I am. And that last one, knowing who you are, is probably the greatest gift any experience can give you, is finding out where your limits are, finding out what you're good at, finding out what you're not good at, finding out where you can make a difference in the world, finding out what your mission is. At the, I was in my late 20s then. I was 27 when I got up. Um, uh, I had found what I could do. That gave me the confidence that what I was doing is probably what I should be doing. I've talked to a lot of vets that have books in them. They're just not writers. I've been trying to figure a way that vets could tell their stories more. You're trying to do that now with this program, and I think that's good. Most people think you write a book, you sit down to write a book. No, you sit down, you write pieces of the book. When something pops in your mind, you say, oh, let me write that down. So you write that down. All you're doing is gathering together pieces of a puzzle. Then there comes a time to start putting a puzzle together. You get the puzzle half together, you realize I need to build more pieces. So you got to go build more pieces.